In his much acclaimed book, Future is Asia, Parag Khanna has an important message to deliver to us all. He believes that the 21st century is going to be made, remade, invented and reinvented in the Asian heartland. He believes that Asia would gain the kind of importance that the Western Hemisphere has had ever since the end of the World War II until now. He also believes that the cultures, the civilizations and the societies of Asia would become molds where the future of humanity would be written, and the Western world would look towards Asia to find inspiration for their own models, for their own cultures and for their own growths and visions. Assalamu alaikum dear students, I am your host Shahrukh Haider, here once again with the 35th session of the GIFTS Distance Learning Program Current Affairs Newspaper Roundup session. And the topic that I am going to discuss today is that the new grade game in Asia is heating up. What is the new grade game? How is it impacting the world? And what kind of changes can we envision in the near future vis-a-vis South Asia and the Central Asian region is concerned? So first of all, like I said, Future is Asia predicts the turn of global politics basically unfolding in the South and the Central Asian regions, and this becoming an engine for growth for the world economy. So that to an extent is coming true. If not true, at least the trends are moving in that direction. So first of all, what is the new grade game? So the new grade game is basically a competition for the energy resources of the energy-rich Central Asian region between world powers such as China, Russia and America. So why is it called the new grade game? Because the original grade game was between the British Empire and the expansionist Tsarist Russian Empire during the 18th century for the control of key trading lanes and access to the Indian Ocean region. To a large extent, the British Empire did win the original grade game, but the new grade game perhaps might not be won by a Western power, because currently China and Russia are leading the race to win the Central Asian energy pool. So who are the parties that are involved in this new grade game and the competition for Central Asian resources? Well, there are at least two different kinds of alliances that are formed in order to participate in this game. First of all, we have the China, Russia, Iran and Pakistan nexus. Now, to a large extent, Pakistan and Iran are aligned with China's strategic vision for this region, including the Belt and Road Initiative and the Pakistan-China Economic Corridor, whereas Russia has different motives. Russia is not completely in line with China's strategic vision and does not necessarily recognize China as the leader of this region and the most important regional power. It has ambitions of grandeur and resurgence of its own. Secondly, we have the United States and the India nexus. Now that nexus came into being roughly 10 or maybe 15 years ago, when China was becoming an important economic power and the United States was increasingly being threatened and feeling underwhelmed by China's increasing influence in the region, and which is why the US wanted to create an anchor in this region which could become a center of America's counter to emerging Chinese power. And what's important here is that the China's strategic vision for this region is much more comprehensive and inclusive than America's vision is. So for example, China's Belt and Road Initiative and its 6 different corridors, which have now been included into the main framework of the Belt and Road Initiative, and now of course the recent China-Iran deal has also become an important cornerstone of the Belt and Road Initiative. China's strategic vision for this region envisions interconnectivity, interdependence, free trade regimes, collective security regimes, and moreover regionalism that we have seen in the case of, let's say, the European Union or the Southeast Asian Association of Southeast Asian Nations, which is the ASEAN group. So to a large extent, China's vision has impacted nearly all of its neighbors, and especially countries in the Central and the South Asian regions, which include India, Pakistan, China, India, Pakistan, Iran, and the Central Asian republics, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and so on and so forth. Recently, China has attempted to thwart its influence and power in the region once again, and to implement a broader framework of regional alliances that would counter any efforts by the United States and the Western Bloc in order to undermine China's Belt and Road Initiative and China's activities in the greater region. So that effort has been in the form of a very extended China-Iran strategic deal. Now this deal entails a $400 billion Chinese investment in Iranian multiple sectors such as infrastructure, energy corridors, defense partnerships, and development of various naval ports and harbors. Moreover, this strategic partnership will entail a 25-year contract on different issues between Iran and China. Now, let's try to dissect this agreement and see what kind of socio-political and geopolitical consequences and implications does this treaty have on different countries. So first of all, I think this deal presents an alternative to Iran for India's unreliable investment and involvement in Iranian economy. So at least since 2005, Iran and India have been moving closer together in their strategic alignment, especially due to Pakistan's constant alienation of Iran and refusal to engage with Iran on a multilateral and comprehensive economic dialogue, which was primarily due to Pakistan's strategic alignment with the United States in the greater global war on terror, which was quite a disappointment for Iran, because Iran did want to create positive and conducive long-term strategic relationship with Pakistan, but Pakistan never really opened to it, to the extent that Iran was forced to create relationships with Pakistan's greatest adversary in the form of India in order to push Pakistan to once again engage with Iran. And I believe this deal is a kind of a success factor for Iran's foreign policy, because it has pushed Pakistan and China to try to pull Iran into their own cloud rather than allowing Iran to keep drifting into the Indian belt. So the Chinese alternative in this case is that India's involvement in Iran has always been conditional of American view of Iran. So whenever America has had a positive view of Iran, that is when India opens up its investments, its companies to Iranian markets, to Iranian energy, and all kinds of bilateral relationships. But as soon as the US withdraws from Iran and reimposes sanctions or escalates matters with Iran, India once again corners Iran and kind of betrays it. And that is something that has been a constant feature of Iran-India relations. For example, after the historic Iran nuclear deal that was signed in 2015 between Iran and other Western partners, to a large extent India started to invest in Iranian energy, Iranian corridors, and Iranian infrastructure development. A lot of projects were launched after the 2015 nuclear deal, and India showed overwhelming support for making Iran a strategic partner. But as soon as the Trump administration decided to scrap the Iran nuclear deal and reimpose sanctions, India once again became a stranger to Iran. Now this quite aptly reminds me of an important quote. There are no permanent friends or enemies in international relations. There are only permanent interests. Napoleon said that, and I think that very peculiarly applies to the situation between Iran and India. So, in response to Indian, hesitation towards Iran after US escalation with Iran, Iran has decided to sever its economic ties with India and have announced to suspend all Indian projects in Iran, which were already on the back burner due to unavailability of Indian funds and Indian reluctance to engage in those projects. Moreover, I think that China and Iran share a very important vision for this region, for the greater Central and South Asian region. So let's look at what that strategic vision and its alignment entails. So first of all, there is the talk of Iran having a stake in the China-Pakistan economic corridor, and both Iran and China want to see CPEC become a reality and want to engage in it to whatever extent is possible. Iran also intends to become an important corner of the China-Pakistan economic corridor. Secondly, a sustainable solution to the Afghan quagmire. Both China and Iran want the United States to withdraw their forces from Iran while leaving behind a sustainable political settlement with a stable government that has rule of law and legitimacy and sovereignty all over the Afghani territory, so that Iran and China could invite and involve Afghanistan in regional energies and other kind of trade projects, and perhaps even try to integrate Afghanistan into the greater Belt and Road Initiative and the China-Pakistan economic corridor narrative. Thirdly, Iran has a lot of energy and China is extremely energy hungry. So naturally China has its eyes on Iranian energy, and China wants to tap into the massive energy resources that Iran has on offer. And that is a very important alignment of interest, because Iran also wants to sell its oil and its gas to China, because due to US sanctions, re-imposition of US sanctions, much of the world does not buy oil or gas from Iran, even though 35% of Iran's GDP actually comes from its fossil fuel sales, which has dramatically plummeted in recent years due to re-imposition of US sanctions, has resulted in a lot of high unemployment and social agitation and economic crisis in Iran. Naturally, Iran wants to solve that crisis, and China presents a very good alternative to do that. Fourth, Iran is also as much interested in tapping into the energy-rich resources of Central Asia as China is. Iran intends to become an important corridor for transporting all of that energy resources and then trading them to the rest of the world, which is why the Chabahar port network and its sister ports were developed in the first place. Although at that time the Chabahar port was developed in collaboration with India to present an alternative route and an alternative paradigm to the China-Pakistan economic corridor, and perhaps try to undermine the China-Pakistan economic corridor. However, now the situation is reversed. Now Iran wants to become a partner in CPEC and make Chabahar port and the Gwadar port sister ports. I'll talk about that more in detail a little later. 5. Iran and China both want to subvert American presence and influence in this region. They want the Afghan crisis to be solved as soon as possible, so the presence of American troops in Afghanistan is removed, which is a major national security threat to China and Iran. Moreover, they want to push any strategic influence and kind of dominance that the United States has in the Asian heartland and broadly in the Indian Ocean region, where key trading lanes lie, which are already to a large extent controlled by the United States ever since the World War II. So, what kind of potential is there present between Iran and China for further developing this deal? Well, first of all, there is the development of Iran-Pakistan gas pipeline and other important regional energy projects. They have been on the back burner and have not been launched properly due to regional tensions, due to the quagmire and the political instability and constant civil war in Afghanistan, and India's nefarious actions in the region as well, and multiple crises in the region. Moreover, the energy projects that have the potential to bring a lot of socio-economic prosperity in the region have yet to be conceived. For example, there could be an Iran-Pakistan-China gas pipeline and oil container pipelines and multiple different paradigms of energy sharing projects, which would bring substantial employment, wealth and socio-economic prosperity to the entire region. That is obviously dependent upon what happens in the Afghanistan peace process, because most of the countries in the region want the Afghan process to be resolved as soon as possible. Second, in 2019, the Iranian president and the Iranian ambassador to Pakistan told in a media interview and media presence multiple times that they intend to make the Chabahar port and the Gwadar port sister ports and build rail and road networks between them to share the burden of becoming important key trading lanes for the entire global trade that passes through the Indian Ocean region. Initially, the Chabahar port network was built as an alternative to the Gwadar and tried to undermine it, but now they want to add value to Gwadar and to the CPEC and to the entire Belt and Road Initiative narrative of China, because now Iran had realized that its strategic interests are significantly more aligned with China than they were with India, because India's interests are majorly aligned with the United States, which is a major enemy, perhaps the most important existential enemy of Iran. And thirdly, perhaps there is a lot of potential, and perhaps China and Iran are considering extending the China-Pakistan economic corridor into Iran and perhaps making it a China-Pakistan-Iran corridor. There's a lot of potential of achieving that as well, with a lot of connectivity between different ports, different strategic cities, industrial zones between Iran, Pakistan and China. And this would make the entire region a very pro-industry, pro-manufacturing and pro-growth region. And finally, there is a lot of potential. The fourth point is that there is a lot of potential for connectivity of Iranian membership into the Shanghai Cooperation Organization format, because the Shanghai Cooperation Organization was conceived in order to create a regional security alliance and to thwart any extra regional security presence or influence or dominance such as by United States in this region. So Iran is already under pressure from United States sanctions, and a lot of escalation and tensions have developed in recent times between USA and Iran. And I believe in order to secure Chinese investment in Iran that they have secured recently with this deal, China would also want to ensure the security of their investment, which I believe they might achieve if they grant Iran a permanent membership of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So there's a lot on the horizon, and a lot of things are changing in this region, and rapidly developing dynamics are once again putting Pakistan in the center of the politics of this entire region, which constitute the Central, the South and the East Asia. With that, thank you very much for your patience. Keep tuned in. Allah Hafiz.